The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city streets as people hurried to finish their business before nightfall. A tense calm hung in the air, one that felt like the quiet before a storm. It had been one of those days. Everything seemed ordinary at first, but you could feel something waiting just around the corner, like a fuse just about to ignite. And for one woman, that fuse was about to go off in a way she never saw coming. Angela Matthews, a seasoned detective with the city police department, had seen her fair share of ugly in the world, but today was different. As she walked down the sidewalk, minding her own business, a patrol car pulled up beside her, its siren blaring, as the officer inside slammed the brakes. The harsh screech of rubber on asphalt echoed in the still air. Angela glanced up, her heart already beginning to race. She had no idea why the officer had stopped her, but she knew one thing for certain. She was about to find out. The officer stepped out of the car, his uniform crisp, but his stance was too aggressive for a simple traffic stop. He didn't seem to care who she was or where she came from. There was a certain smugness in his walk, a sense of superiority that felt all too familiar. His eyes locked on Angela, and without a word he pointed at her and barked, "You, come over here." Angela froze, surprised by his tone. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "You fit the description," the officer said, his eyes narrowing. "You're under arrest for suspicion of assault. Come with me." Angela's stomach churned, a flood of disbelief washing over her. She had done nothing wrong. But before she could even process what was happening, the officer grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the car. The weight of his grip was forceful, and she could feel the heat of his anger rising. Something in the back of Angela's mind told her to stay calm, to not escalate the situation. She wasn't a rookie on the force anymore. She had been through far worse than this. But something about the way he was treating her, like she was just another nameless suspect, hit too close to home. This wasn't just a random stop. This was about something deeper, something uglier. "Let go of me," Angela said, her voice cold now. She wasn't going to let him drag her around like this, no matter what the accusation was. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of her badge. And then, she did something she rarely had to do. She pulled it out and held it up for the officer to see. The moment the officer's eyes landed on the badge, his face changed. It was subtle, but Angela saw the way his jaw clenched, his hand faltering on her arm. There was a brief flash of recognition, and for the first time he looked unsure. For a split second, he seemed to reconsider his next move. Angela wasn't about to let him off that easy, though. "You know what this is," she said, her voice steady but dripping with an undeniable authority. "I suggest you let go of me, and we can both go about our day." But the officer didn't release his grip. Instead, he looked her over more. Carefully, his expression flickering with something that could only be described as fear, or maybe it was something worse. Was it shame? Regret? Or was it simply that he had realized just how badly he had messed up? He seemed to be stalling, weighing his options. The air between them crackled with tension, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. All that mattered was the officer's next move and whether or not he would do the right thing. As Angela's eyes locked onto his, she saw something shift in his demeanor. His hand loosened just a little. He took a step back. But before he could speak, the voice in his radio crackled to life. "Unit 22, what is your status? Over." The officer's eyes flicked to the radio, then back to Angela. There was hesitation in his voice when he finally responded. I've got a 1015 here. Over." The dispatcher's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Unit 22, stand by. Officer, can you confirm the subject's ID? Over." Angela could feel the weight of the situation pressing in. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than some random traffic stop. The world was watching, and every move mattered. The officer's eyes darted between her and his radio. He was clearly torn, caught between doing the right thing and maintaining the lie he had built up in his own mind. And as the seconds stretched out, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was more to this than just a simple case of mistaken identity. And then, just when it seemed like the officer was about to make a decision, something unexpected happened. A figure appeared from around the corner, moving toward them, with purpose. Angela's eyes narrowed as she recognized the familiar face. Angela? The voice was familiar, steady, calm, and filled with authority. It belonged to her partner, Detective David Carter. "What's going on here?" Angela glanced at him, then back at the officer. She saw the way the officer's eyes flickered, the way his body tensed. This wasn't just a case of racial profiling anymore. This was something far deeper, a moment that could change everything. The officer's gaze locked with David's, and for the first time, Angela saw the fear in his eyes. It wasn't just fear of being caught, though. There was something else, something he wasn't ready to face. David stepped forward, his posture assertive but calm. "What's the problem, officer?" he asked, his voice clear and unwavering. The officer opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at David, then back at Angela, his face twisting with confusion, guilt, and frustration. Angela stood there, waiting, watching as the officer fumbled for answers. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. She could feel the heat of the moment building, and just when it seemed like the truth was about to spill out, the officer took a step back, his hand shaking slightly. "We need to talk," he said, his voice almost a whisper. This wasn't supposed to happen. The air was thick with the unsaid words hanging between them. Angela's mind raced, but she knew one thing for sure. This moment was far from over, and she was going to get to the bottom of it. But what would happen next? Would the truth finally come to light? Or was this just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would change everything Angela thought she knew about the world she had sworn to protect? As the officer stood there, avoiding eye contact, Angela couldn't help but wonder, what was he hiding? Angela held her ground, her badge still firm in her hand as the officer stood frozen. She studied him closely now. Tall, stocky build, mid-30s maybe, eyes darting like he was trying to figure out how to clean up a mess he never expected to step into. The kind of man who looked confident when holding power, but fell apart. The second it slipped through his fingers. Detective David Carter shifted closer to Angela, sensing her tension without needing her to say a word. They had worked side by side for years. He knew that look on her face. It wasn't just frustration. It was focus. She was reading the situation, weighing each word and movement just like she always did when something felt off. "What do you mean this wasn't supposed to happen?" David asked, voice low and controlled. The officer licked his lips, still not meeting their eyes. "I got a call, a report of an assault. Witness said the suspect was a black woman in a red coat, walking east near 43rd. Angela's eyes narrowed. She looked down at her own jacket. It was burgundy, not bright red, but close enough if someone was just glancing. "And that's enough for you to grab someone off the street without asking questions?" He didn't answer. He knew better than to try. David stepped in. "Did you run her ID? Did you even ask her name before throwing cuffs around?" The officer's silence said everything, and Angela knew, deep down, this wasn't just a mistake. This was how it always started, with assumptions, with quick decisions made through the wrong lens, with people who were supposed to protect acting like judge and jury. Angela slowly returned her badge to her pocket. "You got a name, officer?" "Rogers," he muttered. "Officer Michael Rogers." David pulled out his notepad, jotting it down. "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs," he said plainly. "This stop never should have happened, and we're going to find out why it did." Angela didn't say anything, not yet. She wasn't done piecing things together. The way Rogers had looked at her, it wasn't just the shock of her badge. It was something more. Recognition, familiarity, like he had seen her before. Angela had worked undercover before, many times. And sometimes that meant getting close to people who wore the same uniform she did. People who crossed lines, bent rules, and thought no one was watching. Maybe that's where she had seen him before. Maybe not. But she'd find out. The tension in the air didn't lift, even as they walked away from the squad car and left Rogers standing there like a man who had just realized the ground under him wasn't solid. Angela's jaw stayed tight, her mind racing. David could tell. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly as they walked toward his car. Angela didn't answer right away. Then she said, "He knew me. I'm sure of it." David glanced over. "From where?" "I don't know," she said. But that wasn't just panic on his face, it was something else. Fear. Like he'd been caught doing something he never thought would come back to him. They climbed into David's unmarked car. The engine hummed to life, but neither of them moved. Angela stared out the window. This might go deeper than a bad stop. "I think we need to pull his file." David nodded. "I'll have it on your desk by morning." As he pulled out onto the street, the city passed by in blurs of neon and shadow. Angela thought about how many times things like this happened, how often assumptions turned dangerous, how often people like Rogers got away with it. But something about today felt different. It wasn't just the stop, it was the way he reacted to her. Like she had stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. Back at the precinct, Angela didn't go straight to her desk. She went to the surveillance room instead. She needed to see the footage, body cam, dash cam, anything from Officer Rogers' patrol car. If he had nothing to hide, then it would all be right there. But if he had something to lose, she might find it buried in the silence between his words. The tech team was still filing reports when Angela walked in. She didn't need to say much. Her badge, her presence, and the name Officer Rogers were enough. The supervisor pulled up the footage from the incident. Angela leaned in, watching carefully. The video showed her walking calmly down the street. Then the patrol car screeched up and Rogers jumped out like he was ready for a fight. No conversation, no questions, just a rush to judgment. But it was what happened before he stepped out that caught her attention. He was speaking into his radio, but not to dispatch. The timestamp didn't match the official call. She rewound and listened again. Target in sight. Looks like her. Burgundy jacket, eastbound. Target? Angela froze. She hadn't heard that term used since her deep undercover days, when they monitored suspects during sting operations. It wasn't standard patrol language, and it sure wasn't how you described a random assault suspect. She turned to the tech supervisor. "Can you pull his full dispatch history for today?" He nodded, already typing. Angela's heart beat a little faster. Something about this was wrong. Very wrong. What if she wasn't just stopped because she matched a vague description? What if she was being watched? David returned not long after, holding a manila folder. "Rogers' record," he said, handing it over. Angela flipped through it quickly. Clean on paper, commendations, routine patrols, 0 complaints on file. But that only made her more suspicious. No one working the streets that long stayed squeaky clean, not without help. "I need to know who he's connected to," she said. "Friends in the department, supervisors, past assignments, everything." David raised a brow. "You think this was planned?" "I don't know yet," Angela said. "But I don't believe in coincidence." They both knew how things worked behind closed doors. Sometimes officers protected each other. Sometimes records were scrubbed. Sometimes the truth got buried, so deep it took years to dig it back up. And sometimes people like Angela stumbled into something they weren't meant to find. But this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. Not just for herself. For every person who got stopped, searched, and silenced without reason. For everyone who didn't have a badge to pull out. Angela stood up, holding the folder tight. The answers were out there. She could feel it. She just had to survive long enough to uncover them.